My name is Zonnie Gorman, and I am from the class of 1981, and I live in Gallup, New Mexico. I really don't know how my family, my mom and dad, my brother, were the ones that they wanted to get me off the reservation because I was getting in trouble. I was, hanging out with bad people, and so they wanted me to experience other things. So I don't know how they heard about Verde Valley, but I sure am glad they found Verde Valley. I really am, because it was a transformative time for me. I was there for 3 years, and I'm just thankful that they found Verde Valley. And I think everything happens for a reason, so I think it was meant to be. I thought it was gorgeous. I mean, the landscape and the red rocks. I had never been to Sedona before when they took me down to go to school. Well, actually, I went down for interviews at first. And I've always loved just being out in the country, in the landscape, and it's a gorgeous landscape. So that's what attracted me first. And then I love horses, and so I got to ride a lot when I was there, and there was a very favorite horse named Patrick that I found out a couple of years after, because we bonded. I found out a couple of years later that it was a horse that had been a barrel racer on the Apache reservation. So Pam Roper, who was the person in charge of the horses, she always said, well, that's why he takes to you so much. But yeah, the horses and the landscape, that's what I loved. Wow. Like I said, Verde Valley influenced me tremendously in so many ways. I mean, I don't even know where to begin. It changed my life. Like I said, I was kind of a bad kid, and I went to Verde Valley so that my parents wanted me to have a good education, and I definitely got that there. The intercultural aspect of Verde Valley School was extremely important to me. In fact, 2 years after I traveled, or 2 years after I went to Verde Valley School, I traveled in a group called the People, which was an international cast. So it was kind of like traveling with people on the road, or traveling with Verde Valley on the road. See, I get them confused. That's how close they were. So both of those two experiences were, they're interchangeable in my mind. But the interculturalness, being friends with people all over the world is just an amazing experience. So I can travel anywhere in the world and I know somebody that's really important to me. I have to go back to Patrick, the horse. We were inseparable because I was actually a very quiet person in high school. And so I spent a lot of time alone. I was also an only child, so I was used to being alone. And so I would spend a lot of time, going out riding and spending time with Patrick. And he was a white horse. And I remember one time there was a group of us that went on a trail ride. And Patrick and I were bringing up the rear. And I was riding bareback. And, at that point where the front horse takes off, of course, everybody else's horse takes off. And so we were running. And, I knew how to ride pretty well, so I wasn't too worried about falling off, except that there was a sharp curve around a large sagebrush. And Patrick went one way, and I went the other way off of his back. And luckily I landed on a pretty soft area. But when I finally turned over and looked up, here's Patrick standing right over me, the horse, just looking down at me like, duh, what happened? So, that's what I remember most is, I think just a lot of those tranquil moments of being, with nature and my thoughts. And I used to write a lot of poetry when I was in high school, so those kinds of times were very special to me. Oh yeah. Let's see. Wow, my first year, where did I go my first year? They all were in Mexico, actually, all my field trips. The last field trip that I went on was one it was a hiking one to Tarahumara Canyons, the Copper Canyons in Mexico. And it was kind of interesting because I didn't get to experience the hike because my knee went out. But I did get to experience the trip. So a couple of things that I remember about that trip. We went down by train, and what struck me about going down on the train was not the train ride, but we would have these other trains that would pass us, and they would all have these flatbeds. And on each of these flatbeds were these huge like motorhomes. So they were all American tourists that were traveling to wherever in Mexico. And I would think that was just like, oh God, you know, Americans. But that really struck me. So then we got to a little town called, oh God, what was it called? I think it was Huepac. And it was a little tiny town. You could literally throw a stone from one end to the other just about. And there was a hotel. We stayed there a night or two, and then we went off to the hike. And I think we were 3 days out, and my knee just collapsed. So they decided they wanted to send me back on the train, and I said, no, you're not sending a 15-year-old by herself on the train. No, it's not going to happen. So I said, find me a host family, because I want to have my field trip experience. So they found me a host family, and it was the mother of the man who owned the hotel that we had stayed at. And her little home was like literally from here to the sidewalk across the street there by the railroad track. And the little place that she lived was like the one or two first places that the train would come into the town. And I guess that was the place where that was his cue to honk the horn on the train. And I didn't know this, of course, so the first night there, about 5 o'clock in the morning, honk, you know, right there. I mean, I literally jumped out of bed. But it was an interesting thing. She owned a restaurant in this little house that she had, and so there were 3 rooms. The first room was the restaurant, and it had, like this, maybe 3 or 4 tables in it, and it had a jukebox. And then the middle section was the kitchen. And then the last part of it was the bedroom. And there was this huge, like, king-size bed in there. I mean, literally you fell into the bed and that was it. So that's where we all stayed. And her little granddaughter was with her. And her little granddaughter's name was Cecilia. And I remember that because she would love to play the song Cecilia on the jukebox. So she was always like, Cecilia, I can't sing, Cecilia, you know, you're breaking my heart. And so she had me try to translate it for her and everything. So anyway, I had a great time staying there. But going back to the tourists, I have to mention this because it's an image that even to this day haunts me. I met a girl who was an American, and she had married a Mexican guy from this town, and they lived on the other side of town, which was literally just a few short steps away. But I stayed with them one evening, and their place was kind of up a hill, so when you looked out their window, you looked down this dirt road that kind of wandered down, and you could see homes, and then you could see the railroad tracks. And just in front of the railroad tracks, there was a boxcar, and there was a family living in this boxcar. And so that morning I woke up and I opened up the curtains and I was looking out, and outside the boxcar there was a mother. She was hanging up clothes, laundry, on this kind of makeshift line. And there was some children, you know, playing around. And sitting right behind this boxcar, and this, you know, woman who was obviously barely making it, was one of those flatbeds with this brand new motorhome. And to make it worse, there was this grass, a fake grass that had been laid out on the front part of the flatbed. And the 2 Americans were sitting there, I'm assuming they're Americans, were sitting there on lawn chairs, and they were throwing candy out to kids that were there on the side. I mean, and just to see that contrast when I open that window, it's just something that's always stuck in my brain. But anyway, you know, There are different ways to experience cultures, and that's how some people do it, is by being the tourist. And that's one thing that I'm very, very grateful about places like Verde Valley School, groups like Up With People that I traveled with, because you get to really know people and experience cultures and lifestyles in a way that most people don't get that opportunity. I would have to say Brady Hall, believe it or not. You know, I'd go up to Cow Pie, and I loved going up to Cow Pie. Like I said, you know, I like to hang out outdoors outside. But I also love dance. I started doing traditional Indian dance when I was very young. I did the hoop dance when I was growing up. And I got involved in ballet, modern jazz, and I really enjoyed that. And so I would spend a lot of time in Brady Hall, just, you know, going and dancing on the stage when nobody was around. So that was probably the place on campus that I enjoyed going to the most. There was a couple of people. I come from an artistic family, and I was always kind of intimidated by the people in my family that were artists. But I really got to experience a lot of my own coming out as an artist at Verde Valley. Because before, I used to be very intimidated. My brother was R.C. Gorman, my father, Carl Gorman. They're very famous Indian artists. And I couldn't draw. I couldn't even draw a stick figure. But I got really interested in ceramics. And I'm trying to remember, because there were two people. This is terrible. I'm terrible with names. I can see his face. But I just, you know, he really allowed me to do a lot of things in ceramics, because I couldn't throw either. He was trying to teach people to throw. And I started sculpting, and I really enjoyed that. So that was important to me. Maggie was very, I loved acting too, so she was very special to me. Glenn, he was the coach. I used to run a lot. I used to go running in the mornings, and that was always special. Like I said, I loved to be in the outdoors. And I also danced at that time, and again, I cannot remember her name. This is terrible. I'm getting old. God, I can't remember her name. And then Pam Roper, who I do remember her name, and Patrick, the horse. But Pam was head of the riding program. So, yeah. You know, I haven't really reconnected with Verde Valley in a number of years. And so remembering some of these things is like I'm trying to pull it out of a hat right now. But I'm having a great time doing that. I would tell myself to embrace every experience. You know, I think this is probably kind of advice that everybody, when you get to a certain age, you know, you realize that a lot of things that you experienced, especially in your teenage years, you took for granted. People that you should have paid more attention to, or got to know better. So that's actually kind of something that I do now, because like I said, I was a very introverted person when I was a child and a teenager. And so I oftentimes was more comfortable with myself than I was with other people. And so now I try, from that experience, it's made me realize I need to embrace experiences. I need to be extroverted and talk to people that I would normally not talk to, and get to know better. So that's what I would say, take advantage of those people and experiences that you may not think are important at the time, but many, many years later you're going to look back and go, God, I met that person and yet I never really got to know them.